Hello, so I made a video, or I'm making a video that goes over this shader. So this is a kind of a UI console style shader. Essentially what I wanted to focus on was some of the tools you can use within Unreal to make something that's animated and is the kind of thing that you'd get on like a computer screen without actually using either movies loaded in or a animated clip. So this doesn't really mean anything, and it's just designed to sort of focus on a few different techniques. So let's have a quick look at the instance of this shader so we can see what's going on. Here it is. Just going to push that across there like that so we can actually see it in scene. And then make this. I'll also just check that that's the one that's actually on there. So I've got this separated out into a few different areas. I've got bars. So these are the bars. They don't seem to be doing a great deal at the moment. That might be because they're broken. They're broken in the session. So we'll have a look at that. I've got the bezel, which is this part. I've got the code, which is this bit here. I've got the extraction, which is that bit there. I've got the general bits, which are just metalness and roughness. Pull the roughness of this shader down shiny. And then we've got the ring, which is the yellow bit. And there are a bunch of parameters that we've got, so things we can do. The bars are broken, so we'll ignore that for now. I'll come back to that. We can use an offset, so this is using a bump offset. We can offset the bezel. So if I push it in, it will back, and if I pull it up, it will pull it out. And where that's most noticeable is, so if I put it like there, if I now get closer to it and try and move around it, you'll see that this edge is getting closer to this, whereas this one's going further away. So it looks like it's in front of it. If I push it the other way, it might be more obvious. It's maybe a bit far away. You can see it looks like it's behind. So that's just using bump offset. It's not actually doing anything to the geometry. In the shader, it's creating an offset based on where the camera is. And they can be quite a nice effect to put into these type of things. And that's just using the bump offset. I can change the code colour. I can do the same with the code. I can offset it, so I can make it so that goes into the distance. There you go. So if you look, it looks like the code's hidden. It's inside. So these things are great for like windows and things like that. You can do that kind of thing as well. The extraction color I can change. One of the interesting things about this is I haven't made a separate emissive section to this shader, because you don't really need to when you're doing this sort of thing. This extraction thing can be set to a different colour, but it also can have its value changed, and by putting a number bigger than 1, you're essentially starting to make this be emissive, make it glow. So if I get this back to a value of 1, you'll see that it's just blue. If I push this to 200, it basically works like how you would do if you're multiplying an emissive. So that's a handy thing to know about those, because that basically, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the network you just don't need to build because of that. You know that the value's been pushed because they start to look like this, the textures. You see this one's done the same way. And I have a pulse speed. So the pulse speed is just using a sine wave to control the speed of it. So I've got something that you can make it go faster, or I can pull it right down. Make it go slow. Really slow. The general stuff is just metalness and roughness. The ring, I have a switch which allows me to switch the gradient, the UV gradient. If you can see, it's yellow going into kind of like a red colour. If I make this maybe this colour a bit more obvious, like a you can see it's kind of going yellow to purple. then I can switch this. So the gradient's going this way at the moment. If I switch this, then I can make the gradient go the opposite way. So it goes from left to right. And I can change my ring speed because it's slightly offset. Make it slow. And I can change the ring colours, as you've seen already. So there's some stuff in there that's, you know, the sort of things that you maybe want to do and you maybe would want to have control of if you were creating this type of thing. So let's have a look at the shader. Okay, so it's all commented up so you can see what it is. I've broken it down into these different elements. So for it to be able to do the animation, things like that, we have to break this down into its constituent parts. So if we look at this, I have the bezel part, which if I just right click on here and go preview, start previewing node, you can see what this bit's doing, which is this, which is nothing too exciting. It's just really describing the bezel part. The interesting thing is that I've removed the ring from the texture. To show you that, if I show you the texture, in fact I'll show you it in Photoshop. Okay, so this is the material I've been working on. It has two components. These two components are basically two textures that I output. So the first one is this one. It's called Mask 1 Clamped because this is a clamped texture, which we'll talk. I'll get to it. But within that, it has three channels. Blue channel. In fact, let's go the other way around. Red channel has the whole thing kind of laid out. The green channel has this mask. So this mask in the green channel is being used to highlight this, to take this area out and use it separately. There's no reason why instead of having a mask here I could have just taken this part and put it into the second channel. It's just ease or preference or whatever way you want to look at it. I did it this way around. And then the blue channel has the bars, the interior parts of the bars, as a mask as well, so that I can separate those parts out as well. The other one that I'm using has a red channel which is a gradient. So this is the gradient I'm using for the bars, which are currently broken, but we'll fix them. Then there is a mask for to separate the code out from everything else. So this code goes down this part here, but I wanted to make sure that it didn't sit outside of this little window. So that's what that is. And then we've got the extraction sign and the little dot there, which is a thing all by itself. And also within that, all of this, I have an alpha channel. And the alpha channel is, it's not that easy to see. The alpha channel is basically like code text, and that goes the whole length of that. And then the idea is that I pan that, but you can only ever see it through this part here. It's a bit confusing because it's not like I just imagined it all and this all just appeared at once. I built it over time. I just worked out what I needed and then put it into new channels. So it's not like you should be looking at this and going, oh yeah, Dave, that's totally obvious, because it isn't. So switch my alpha channel off so we can see what's going on, and we'll get to this clamped part in a minute. The other thing is, you may be looking at this thinking, it's all sat in the layer structure and you've got these set into the red, green and blue channels. How is he doing that? Because normally what people do is they go into the channels and they just paste these things in to there. So how can I have it that I've got like editable folders here that have got separate things in it, but this is only being viewed in the red channel? Well, it's easy really. I'll show you how. So here, this is meant to just show the red channel. If I right click on it, if I go to blending options, under advanced blending, it gives me the option of what channels I want to use. So I've just switched off green and blue. So this will, anything that's in this layer, or anything that's in this, this layer is just going to show in the red channel, and it won't show anywhere else. Likewise for green, I'm only using the green channel. I'm only using the blue channel, and that makes this a lot easier to work with. So if you come up to this one, I've actually got folders for this stuff. So my red, I've got all my gradients in different layers, and then what I just have is on the folder, I have a blending option on the folder, and the folder is everything's in the red channel. I could swap it to the green channel if I wanted, and then switch this on, and now all that stuff's in the green channel. So now if I go to my green channel, you can see that that's in the green channel now and not the red channel. So that's basically how that works. So for my first one of these, I export it out, and what I end up with is, let's come out of here for a minute, is I just end up with these two masks. So if I open this up, you can see this has got the alpha in it, so you can only see the alpha. Red, green, blue, alpha. Red channel, green channel, blue channel, alpha channel. That's it. The clamped business is the texture is basically set up with I think it's under texture. Rather than the standard thing for this would be for it to wrap. And what we want it to do is we want to clamp it. So when you think about textures, you always think about this thing about if you wanted, you make a tiling texture and it tiles outside of 0 to 1. So if you put your UVs across here, it just keeps going, that type of thing. And that's great. And that's how you want, like 9.9999 times out of 10. That's exactly what you want. However, in this example, and you get this with some particles as well, what we want is we want something to rotate. And because we want this part to rotate, if we stick a rotator on it, it will, once it gets to 45 degrees, it will start showing the the next tiling texture through on it. So to show you that, if I go to here, so this is the ring part, if I switch off the clamping, let's do that, you'll be able to see, because if you look at this, if you see what it's doing, if I just start previewing this part, this is basically just dealing with the ring. If I now go back to my texture and I undo it and hit save, if I start previewing this, there you go, see that up in the top corner. That's basically, as this turns 45 degrees, it's allowing the next, it's the edge of the textures here, so it just starts showing some of the rest of it. We don't want that, you want it to stay black. So you either have to make your stuff smaller and have more black around it, and that's one way you can do it, or you can open your texture up, you can set it to clamp. However, one of the issues with setting it to clamp is that once you need to do things that are panning or going across this way, you actually need the tiling to work again. So there's one of the reasons, I mean, I needed more channels than this, but one of the reasons why these have what they have in each one of these textures is because this one has panning stuff in it, and this one has stuff that you don't want to move or you just want to rotate. So if we look at this one has text in it. This is the one I'm using the alpha for in here, for the text that goes down. This gradient pans, this doesn't move, this doesn't move. This does move. So there's two things in those channels that move. Whereas with this one, I don't want to move some of that stuff. Anyway, so the way this works is we've got this texture in here. What we want to do is we want to rotate it, so we're using a rotator. But what we want to do is to be able to control how it rotates. So we're multiplying time by this parameter called ring speed, which we've just set at 1. The rotator set at a value of 0.5, so it's already moving. And yeah, that should be that. So what I'm doing here is I am multiplying the red channel by the green channel. Now the red channel has the bezel part in it, this part, the actual bar in it, and the green channel has the ring part in it. So essentially what it's doing is it's just by multiplying it, we're basically only able to see the bit where the ring is involved, and then we're multiplying that by this gradient UV switch. It's going in here because this basically has two lerps in it, and the lerps basically duplicate themselves. Because I'm using this thing called a linear gradient. Linear gradient gives me the option to have a gradient which, if I just show it, sorry, it basically just does this, creates a gradient. So what I'm doing is I'm basically creating one gradient that goes one way and another gradient that goes the other way, and I'm just feeding this into both these lerps, and the alpha for these lerps is coming from this linear gradient. These are both fitting into this gradient UV switch, so that I'm basically using a switch to say you can use either one, which will use this one, or you can use this one, but the colours remain the same. And then I'm multiplying that whole thing by this here. Now let's have a look at it. You can see what it looks. So by multiplying those two things together, I only get my ring that's rotating and not the other stuff. And then essentially what I'm doing is here, so I'm basically taking this, what I've got here, these options here. Let's preview this node. So I've got a gradient going this way, or a gradient going this way, and essentially I'm multiplying them by black and white value, which is this one, and that will basically give me, this will work like a mask, and give me this, where the gradient shows through and the thing moves around, and that's it. So I send this into this part, which is where I add all the elements together. So if you think about multipliers basically being something that, if it's white it stays the same, if it's less than white it gets darker, so if it's black it disappears or doesn't come through, then that's handy for doing things like this. But if I wanted to add the bezel back in to this, then what I would do is I'd need to use an add. So that's what we're doing here, is just adding each individual. I'll just split it out so that it's easier to kind of work out. So the next part's the bars. Now if you remember, our bars are broken, and the reason they're broken is because this is the wrong texture that's attached to them. It needs to be the other one. So let's just change that. So I've got my texture selected that it needs to be, and if I just drop that into there, so I select this, I'll just click that, and then that's our new texture. And now that should start to work. So if we start previewing that node, that's what we were looking for. So this isn't doing it in the minute because we haven't saved it. If I save it, this should start working. There you go. So this is what we're doing with this. We're basically making this. So the way we do that is we have got can I just open this up a bit? We have got our texture. We're using the red channel, which is the gradient, and we are using two colours, and we are using a panner to push this gradient along. So if you look at this, what this actually looks like with these two things in, start previewing the node. This is what we're actually doing. We're using the gradient that we created in the red channel, and we've given it two colours. This one is so we're giving it two colours, and again with all of these we can push these values, which is what is happening here. If I push this back to 1, this becomes a lot more normal. There you go, 100. And if you look, what happens here is if all these values that we're putting in at a higher value, I've just taken this end result of this whole thing, which looks like this, and I've just fed it into emissive colour as well, and any of these that are past the value of 1 will come through into the emissive colour. So it's quite simple really. Right, apologies there, Unreal crashed. Not uber helpful. Okay, so yeah, so we've got this here. If I start to preview it, so this panner part is basically coming from having a panner node with a speed value in X, so that makes it travel this way, and then using a multiply with a parameter that we've called color phase speed. So that feeds into all of that goes into this lerp. So this is the alpha that we use to lerp these two things together. So we end up with something like this, and then what we do is we multiply that with our blue channel, which is the bars from this other texture. So if we do that, we end up with, because we're multiplying it, basically all the black areas will stay black, and all the not black areas will come through. So we basically only see the bars. So once we've got those on, then what we can do is we can add those back into this. The next one is the code part, and again it's a lot of the similar kind of stuff. The thing that's different here is we start using the bump offset. So if we look at what's going on there, we have this texture sample. In fact, let's see it from the preview node. So we've got this. So we've got panning code that's sitting in a mask. So the mask is coming from here. So this green bit that you can see in here, this is the bit that cuts this out like a stencil. The colour is being multiplied, so the stuff that's coming through is being multiplied by this colour, which is a cheap way to do that. So we can just change this colour, get red if we wanted, or whatever. It would be fine, it would work. Oh, it's orange there. And again, we can do the same thing with the value. We can make this like 200, and it would be super bright code coming through. And the movement is basically coming from this panner here. So we've got a speed of -1 in Y, which makes it go down. If I go the other way, like to positive, it'll just push up that way. But -1 in Y, it's too fast. Minus 0.01. Really slow. Okay, so if we go for that, that's fine. And then the bump offset is fed into the coordinate of the panner, which is then going into the coordinate of the texture. And essentially what we've got is we've got a parameter value going into here, which is the high offset. So its default value for this one is -1, so it gives you a bit of this. But if we push that further, it will become more obvious what that's doing. You look at it, it's basically, so the mask stays in the same position, but the code gets offset. So the mask part here is like almost like a little window into this world. So it's quite a cool little trick. But if we just leave it as -1, so there's a little bit on it, and it's a parameter, so we can change it. So again, this then is then added to the rest of the stuff, and the last part is the extraction, and that has a slightly different thing on it as well. So for the extraction, we're using the blue channel to describe the text. So you can see it here, the written part says extraction. And then what we're doing is we're multiplying that with a colour. So if we start previewing the node, then that's what we get. We're using this with a bit of emissive in the value. And then we're pushing this into a lerp. And we are basically lerping between this value and a value of 0, which is black, and the alpha between these two things is animated using a sine wave. So a sine wave, if you remember, is it's like a waveform. So it's like, if you imagine, I'm drawing with my mouse here, but if you imagine this waveform, this is like 0 going up to 1 and then going down to 0 and then going up to 1. So black, white, black, white. So that's how the sine wave works, but we don't have a lot of control over it. So to control it, what we're needing to do is take time and multiply time into the sine wave to basically control how fast it does that wave. So the extraction pulse speed is basically a parameter value that's multiplying time to either speed time up or slow time down to make this sine wave change. So if you get the effect of that, this is using basically going between these two things, this, 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 and this is the thing that's controlling it. So if we change that speed to 1, it speeds up, and if we change it to 0.3, it's like just fades in and out. So the last thing we need to do to make all of that come together is we just need to add them all together. So if we start with this one, this is basically the bezel and the bars added together. We then take that and add it to the ring. We then take that and then add it to add the code to it, and then on top of that we add the extraction point, and that's it. And then they feed into the base colour and the emissive colour, and anything that we push past 1 will basically become emissive in colour. And then I just have a parameter for metal, which we probably not use, and a parameter for roughness, and that's it.